What's up YouTube, Capital G here talking about kaijus in this video and revisiting a topic that I made a video on, I don't know, probably a few months ago, and I don't generally do this. Usually when I'm on one side of the argument definitively, I kind of stay on that side and I don't flip-flop. I don't generally change my mind unless something drastic happens like the format changes or something like that. And I'm not actually doing that with kaijus, but I do think that my perspective on something in this archetype has definitely changed, and that's why I kind of want to bring this up again. And also it's going to be a little different. Usually when I talk about things in regards to like the ban list or what's healthy in my opinion, what's broken, I pretty much like try and beat it into your head, my opinion, and I don't even want to a lot of times listen to other people's opinions. So this is going to be a little different. I kind of want to know where everybody stands on kaijus as just currently in the game right now, like whether you think that they're good, whether you think they're balanced, whether you guys think that they're healthy for the game, because I really feel like this is one of the most divisive topics that we can talk about in Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel like if you probably walked around a regional and asked, I don't know, 100 people like, hey, do you think kaijus are broken? Do you think that Konami should take them out of the game? Do you think that they're balanced? I feel like you would probably get a 50-50 split of players who are like, fuck kaijus, and some players who are like, I don't really think they're that bad. Like for starters, I guess if you were pro getting rid of kaijus, you could look at cards like Santa Claus and Volcanic Queen. You'd be like, well, they completely power creep those cards and they're better in pretty much every conceivable way. But I've always been on the side of, you know, they're inherent neg ones, and I do get that they out any boss monster. And if you're playing a boss monster or bust deck like Herald of Perfection, it definitely throws a monkey wrench in your plans when Konami kind of designed your deck to work around one monster and your opponent can just like so easily out it. But you know, if you don't kill the kaiju, then you know you can die by your own kaiju. But it's really not about that. My perspective has changed because of this card right here. I actually think that all kaijus are perfectly fine. I personally, if I was making the ban list, I wouldn't hit any of the kaiju cards, but one card that I don't think is actually talked about that much, and it's just, I don't know, I feel like just recently after watching so much gameplay from like the YCSs and a bunch of replays, I've come to the conclusion that Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is fucking broken. Like this card is pretty absurd, and why I wouldn't hit these other cards, I definitely think that this card needs to be limited. And before you dislike the video, just hear me out, right? So when you look at this card on paper, it's already as good as a card like Dark Hole. Dark Hole, if I'm not mistaken, is currently what? Semi-limited. Let's see if we can pull up Dark Hole. Okay, there's not two else. There we go. So Dark Hole is semi-limited and it's already on paper as good as a card like Dark Hole. But in addition to that, obviously, you know, two big monsters comes out. Now, generally you're going to take the bigger monster. Like you may give your opponent a Gamma Seal or a Humongous, and then you usually take one of the 3300s, or if something doesn't go right, like maybe you drew your Gamma Seal, you might give them a Humongous and you might summon yourself like a Dogeron. What I'm saying is not only are a lot of times you guaranteed to get at least a little bit of damage, a lot of times it can be a lot of damage if you've got like Thunder King Kaiju and you give your opponent a Gamma Seal. But in addition to that, this card feels like, it feels kind of weird because while all the kaijus are neg ones, and that's kind of what I base a lot of my argument of why kaijus are kind of healthy, is because they're inherent neg ones and because you have to actually kill them. Like Interrupted Slumber feels like the exact opposite of that. It feels like you gain all the momentum from the play, like you get the offensive pressure, and it's a card that actually pays for itself, which is probably like the most absurd thing about this card. Like it's already a Dark Hole, but then during your next turn you can just banish it from the graveyard and just search a random kaiju. And I know people are probably thinking, well, you know, Cap, if you've already got an established field and you just wrecked your opponent, what can that random kaiju do during your next turn? Well, I mean, you know, you can discard it for Twin Twister, you can tribute summon for it if you need like a really big monster. What I'm saying is that there are actual applications, and what's kind of crazy is you can even play this under things like Vanity's Emptiness. Apparently the card will try and resolve as much as possible. So even when you're not allowed to special summon, you can still activate this card. And I actually think that this is one card that definitely needs to go to like limited status. If you look at it in kind of the context of this format, I think that Interrupted Slumber is probably more powerful than it has ever been, because if you think about giving your opponent, let's just say for instance, you guys both get 3300 3300 Kaijus, right? This is the worst case scenario, I guess. In a format where you can literally normal summon, and that normal summon can turn into, you know, 5 different Xyz, including most importantly Trident, and you can easily just blow up your opponent's Kaiju, it's almost like not only are you getting a dark hole, but then you're getting 3300 damage potentially for free, and during your next turn, in case things just go completely bad, you're still like evening out with a 1-for-1. And it's kind of weird because it creates this little dichotomy where it almost feels like right now, because of interrupted slumber, it feels like the ceiling that which, or the threshold that you need to meet for an OTK has been lowered. Like, you guys know that to meet an OTK, or to do an OTK, obviously you have to establish 8,000 points of damage on the board. But when you can activate a slumber and you get your, you know, Thunderstrike Kaiju out or whatever, and then you just normal summon, pop your opponent's Kaiju, it felt like you got spotted 3,300 damage for no reason. Like, this card should have just been a dark hole, and that would have been good enough, but it gives you that potential OTK power where now you only have to, I guess, put what, like another 4,700 on the board. It's kind of crazy. This isn't the perfect metaphor, but it feels a little similar to when Crimson Crisis came out in the old 5Ds days, where like you really didn't have to do 8,000 damage to OTK your opponent, because with Dark Strike Fighter in the game, you know, you usually have to do like maybe 5,000 battle damage, and then in main phase 2 you would just have Dark Strike Fighter just throw all your monsters at your opponent. And I mean, that fucking card could sometimes do like 4,000 battle damage or 4,000 effect damage by itself, which is why it got banned out their one format. And you know what's kind of interesting? It actually took me a while to think of a card that's similar, but you know what Interrupted Slumber reminds me a lot of? It actually reminds me a lot of Sacrifice. When Sacrifice went to 1, I don't think that there were a lot of players saying, oh, thank goodness, this is one of the most broken cards in the game. I think a lot of people realized that Sacrifice just had too much going for it. Like, it had 4 different effects and they were all really, really good. I feel pretty much the same way about Interrupted Slumber. If you look at this card, it has 3 completely different effects and they're all useful in their own way. You know, you look at it on paper and it's a minimum of a dark hole, and that's already pretty damn good, especially in a format like this where, you know, there's not a lot of monsters that are protected from destruction. But then the fact that like it gives you the biggest monster on board as long as you know, pretty much resolve it right, and it guarantees you battle damage. Like, if your opponent's at 1,000 life points and you just use, like, you know, Kaiju Slumber, if you give them a Gamma Seal and you take the 3,300 Kaijus, like, it doesn't matter what the rest of the board is. Like, you can pretty much just kill them by attacking. And then just the cherry on top is the fact that it replaces itself. It feels like it just has a little too much utility. And then there's like the other random things about, like, you know, how you can use it to actually turn off a Vanity's Emptiness. The fact that you can even use this card while Vanity's Emptiness is active is just mind-blowing to me, because the card tries to resolve as much as possible. If you guys watched, I believe it was YCS Seattle where that actually happened. You know what? That was Simo versus Billy Brick where that happened. I just thought that that was absolutely nuts. So what do you guys think? I still think that Kaijus themselves as monsters are, like, I think that they're fair and balanced, but I want to know what other people think. And this isn't like a big debate of I'm right, you're wrong, you're stupid, and you should feel bad. Usually most of my videos are that type of tone, but I want to change it up for this discussion because I have wavered a little bit. Like, I honestly looked at this card and I was like, oh, it's just a dark hole. But now that I'm looking at it, especially as the game has kind of evolved in this format, like, this card is so much different than probably how it would have been used 6 months ago. Now I just feel like, man, it's a dark hole that can probably help you OTK and pays for itself during the next turn. I feel like Interrupted Slumber is so powerful that by proxy, it's making the rest of the Kaijus kind of look bad. And I feel like some of the hate that Kaijus get might actually be linked to this card. But you guys let me know, because I actually think that I'm in the minority when it comes to Yugi tubing and people's opinions on these Kaijus. I think that most Yugi YouTubers think that Kaijus are kind of a problem, but I guess that's what the point of this video is to kind of gauge people and see where they are, see where they're at. Obviously, I'm not talking about Nimnim, but anyways, you guys let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Do you guys think Kaijus are healthy? Do you think that they're fair? Do you think they're balanced? Do you think they should be part of the game? And what do you guys think about Interrupted Slumber? Because I think this card needs to go to 1. Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already.